Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet. And joining me are my good friends. I'm going to talk to Rabbi Barry J. Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island, and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed in New York City. We're recording this still in earlier in the weeks before the Parsha that we're going to discuss, which is Parsha Balak. On the day that we're recording, it's day 629 of the hostages. Every day that we count this sphera, we hope that we don't have to count it another day. And you don't want to say that a number because of that. It's not even a superstition, it's just a feeling of dread.
Really
That
hope that by the time all of you are listening to this,
exactly.
you say, wow.
Right. Well, that's the hope. That's the hope. And of course, with the news so rapidly changing on a day-to-day basis, we really don't know when this comes out, what's going to be in the world. We're recording it because the summer is coming, and we are all on different trajectories through the summer in different places. Let's hope. I want to, before we start, give a big shout out to some of our Canadian viewers and listeners who are going to observe Canada Day on July the 1st, eh? It's going to be Canada Day. And actually, this is going to come out after Canada Day. And July the 4th for our American listeners. This is after that also. So we hope you had a good Canada Day, and we hope you had a good Independence Day. And here we are. We're going to talk about Parshat Balak. Just want to get this out in the open, before we really delve into it. Balak, take it seriously. This story of the itinerant prophet for hire, or is it comic relief? And this story has a place within the otherwise very, very difficult stories of the Book of Numbers. Um, so, what do you make of the placement of this story here? And maybe we should just give it a summary, one paragraph summary, which is that Israel is traversing itself through the desert. They've had numerous campaigns already against against Ammon and the Bashan and Amorites. And Balak, the king of Moab, sees that Israel has been so effective in its desert campaigns that he wants to employ a different tactic. And employ a different tactic means hiring a prophet who will curse Israel. That prophet, a world famous prophet in the ancient world, Bilam, who will curse Israel. Bilam, in the end, does not curse Israel. He only says what God puts in his mouth, and God puts blessings in his mouth. And there are other comical turns in the story, which is why this story, filled with irony, may be seen as a comic relief. But I want to get your, take on any aspect of the story. Barry, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Oh, you're so kind. So I'm thinking, listening to you describe the story, that perhaps the what we're supposed to take away is it is a very funny story, and I think that's important, and that's the shot that we can't get away from. However, it seems to me that it's also a critique of the prophetic class amongst the Israelites, that these are people that certainly from our vantage point, thousands of years later, look at the prophets as noble people, the word of God on their lips, passionate about justice. But also, I think we can see that they're often quite full of themselves and see themselves as perhaps more than they should. And that's why this is a story about Bilam, because the way that you critique your own is by comparing it with the other, because no one feels the threat if you would mention, an Israelite prophet. Just like Aesop, to borrow from a different tradition, cast many of his stories with animals because there's a distance between the animal and the people that he was really talking about. So here, I think what we could take away is that there's some tension between the priests that are responsible, I think, for much of the Torah and the prophets. And this is the priests getting their digs in.
Jeremy, you have a thought just in the 30,000 foot view of the story as its place in the book and comedy, and maybe, reacting something to Barry's idea. I
Yeah.
have a certain reaction to that.
No, I like that sort of the idea that it's kind of a backhanded, you know, a backhanded slap um, at Israelite prophets too, because just to sort of concur with that, one of the things in the Bible is that they have court prophets, and the court prophets, if they're good, like Natan Hanavi, who's David's court prophet, tells him the truth, the uncomfortable stuff he doesn't want to know. But there's a very funny scene. I think Yehoshaphat is the king, jumping Jehoshaphat, and he's got all these prophets who he says, "Should I go to war?" And all of the 100 prophets say, "Yes, Your Majesty." And then I think the king or somebody else says, "Is there anybody else?" He's got this other guy, Michaiah, but I hate him because he always says bad stuff. And and so they ask Michaiah, and he says, "Yeah, you go to war, you're going to lose." Um, and
And you're
so
going to die.
and then you're going to die. Uh, are you sure? Okay, okay, go to war. So there is a one of the tropes then in the Tanakh is that, like a prophet, might be a complete charlatan. Um,
Mhm.
in this case, and so perhaps the critique is backhandedly directed at Israelite prophets, but I could look at it another way, which is to say that that Bilam is a comic character, and the story is so much fun because though he is supposed to be, Yodea Dat Elyon, you have you have a channel to the divine mind. He is a send up, a spoof, because even his donkey sees more clearly. He's got an angel of God right before his eyes. The donkey can see it, and he can't see it. So he is less than an ass. He's
Right.
such an ass that he's less than an ass, and
Well, that
and
would be half-assed.
he's half-assed, and and so I so I think that the fun part for maybe if we can try to imagine, you know, the ancient Israelites sitting around the camp and telling their sacred stories. I think maybe we Americans bristle a little bit at this thought, but I think this is a dumb Moabite story or a dumb, a dumb. The other nations are so dumb. How dumb are they? They're so dumb that when you get a prophet who's supposed to know everything,
Right.
uh, then his eyes are really closed. And when he goes into the poetic portions of the speech, interestingly, the poetic portions of the speech include a metaphor. He is Satum ha'ayin, his eyes closed, nofel uglui einayim, that he passes out and his eyes are open. And so I think there's at least a poetic element about the blindness of this supposedly, but not really, um, uh, uh, divinely inspired guy.
So I have a couple of reactions to what both of you said. One, Barry, the critique of Israelite prophets, so the question in my mind is, are is Moses immune from satire? Is part of adoration of an individual, comedy, making fun, even satire is a way of expressing some kind of relationship with the object of your roast, right? You roast people, I'm thinking back to the great roasts of Dean Martin. These are the 70s when I grew up. We watched the Dean Martin roasts, and we all know that they were highly scripted until they were not, and very spontaneous. But the object of the road, they were all good sports, and they took it really well because at the end of each roast they would say, Frank, we really love you. We really, this man, I'm thinking of Don Rickles roasting Frank Sinatra and said, I want you to know this man is and they
So,
spent a lot of time, sending them up, but they really adored them. So,
so just to add, since you mentioned Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles, there was one when Frank Sinatra was making a comeback tour. He had been
right.
off the road, and Don Rickles looks at him and says, "Frank,
It's
do you
over.
remember when you had a voice?" And it looked like Sinatra was going to come and kill him on the
Kill him.
stage.
Right, right. So
I never like those things. I never like the Purim. I like Purim Torah, but not when it's got a little mean edge to it.
Yeah.
You're talking about Moshe. The Torah ends, of course, or like three or four psukim before it ends. Velo kam navi od uh, b'Yisrael kemoshe. Velo kam b'Yisrael od navi kemoshe. There arose no other prophet in Israel like Moses, and the famous rabbinic drash on that is, in Israel there never was a prophet like Moses, but there was among the Gentile nations, and it was Bilam. So, what is the what is the person who makes such a drash? What are they saying? Are they saying that that Bilam, because he is, as the Torah describes him here, Yodea Dat Elyon, he knows the divine mind, and there's a Talmudic passage that he knows exactly the instant when God gets angry, and then he can curse people because he knows exactly the teeny tiny little instant in which the window is open for a curse, and maybe it really is a statement of his greatness, or maybe the reason that the person made that drash, the reason that it, so to speak, worked or was thought to be insightful, is what we're saying now, that if there is a spoof or a satire quality, um, maybe that's how put that double edge on Moses as well. Then Moses too has the capacity, perhaps, for sometimes having his eyes closed.
right, or being the object of roast. Certainly, I'm thinking of the rabbinic tradition. I'm thinking even, later on. I mean, humor, of course, is part of, Jewish life and Jewish lore. We have plenty of examples of, I can't think of them off the hand, but but there are plenty of examples of humor in the Talmud, in the Midrash, and lighter moments where rabbis that offer us so much wisdom are themselves subject to not ridicule, but certain there are certain moments of levity within the tradition. Otherwise, it wouldn't reflect life, and we can't be, we usually are. In particular, I think I'm very serious about these things, but we all look at various moments in the Torah and think that they could be taken also with humor. I'm just wondering, and reacting to another thing that you said is that so maybe Bilam is serving as a counterweight to Moshe or to other extraordinary individuals, the patriarchs, maybe Abraham, certainly. Then and lots has been said about relating some of the motifs within the story of Balak to Abraham. Um, but I'm thinking like in theatrical terms, this is the parsha, at least 9/10 of the parsha or 6/7 of the parsha, where Moses is off the stage. Moses, it's like they're getting a rest. The Moshe and Bnei Israel, they're not on the stage, they're not interacting, except for the last part of the parsha, which is rather, difficult. But we have a kind of recess from
Right.
Moshe. Go ahead. Yeah.
What's interesting is that in those last few verses, the beginning of chapter 25, Moses does not come off so well.
Yeah.
So that would, I think, strengthen your argument that I don't know, listening to you talk, I think we could say that Moses is self-deprecating,
Yeah.
but he is not a funny guy.
He's not a funny guy. No. I
So this self-deprecation is without humor. And when we think of Moses, as we do traditionally, as the narrator of the text, the narrator often is almost by definition immune from being roasted.
Yeah. One other comment here before we kind of move into some of the content of what Bilam says. So I want to just highlight the fact that Bilam, who is a prophet, is a rather boorish person, would you say? Or let's just say he's cruel. He's not kind to animals. The poor donkey that he's riding on, that evidently he's had this animal for all his life, and he just smacks the heck out of this animal 3 times. And, not that the Torah presents the man of God as a person of kindness, as an exemplar of kindness, but we kind of expect that there would be some compassion. Even I could, Moshe has moments of real compassion. Moshe has compassion for his sister. Moshe has compassion for the people. Um, Avraham, it's debatable, but Abraham has moments of, I don't want to say cruelty, but moments of
Harshness.
Yeah, but Avram's interesting because he has some cruelty towards Hagar and Yishmael and to Sarah, but also,
it's not of his own volition though. He's
no, no,
told to do that.
this is
Yeah.
true. Yes, this is true. But so you maybe say something like, God tells him sometimes you have to be cruel. I don't really love that reading, but whatever.
Okay.
Um, but in general, our reception of the Torah, and when you're a student of Torah, you are a student of what is in the book, and you are a student of how it is the Jews have read the book, because that's what the Torah Shebaal Peh is, the oral Torah, is how it is that we've received it, interpreted it, and made meaning out of it, and we have turned Abraham into the avatar of Chesed. It's he's going out, he wants to find the guests, he wants to bring them in, he argues for Sodom v'Amorah. He's trying to be as much of a source of Chesed, and the reason that Rebecca is to me the much more interesting ancestral figure than her husband Isaac is that she mimics that. She is a person of kindness, and Jacob mimics that. He is also a person of cleverness, yes, but he also like he comes and he waters all the flocks, and he seems to be a person who works hard and is dedicated to good things. So we kind of want Moshe also to be those things. Um, and I think that I never really thought about it before we just said this. Yeah, there's like not a lot of levity. There's not any humor. Every story involving Moshe is a serious matter. Um, uh, but Bilam's like maybe comic qualities include, getting enraged at this donkey who hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
But what I would add, Elliot, is I think that part of the comedy is that he hits the donkey when he shouldn't. He's subservient to God because that's the nature of a prophet, but as the story unfolds, he's also subservient to this dumb animal who has more control over him than Bilam has over the animal.
Sure.
And we're supposed to see that as funny and not think so much about the cruelty because the cruelty is really designed to make a point. And it's striking that when the donkey finally talks, he doesn't say, "You've hurt me." He says, in our language, "Don't be a jerk."
Yeah.
It's striking. You said it's striking. Now that's funny.
Striking. Right.
Uh,
It was
and
unintended.
I
I'm
don't, you know,
sorry.
I don't know if, we think we have a little, stereotype or whatever that we say that donkeys are stubborn, and and maybe they are. I don't know. I don't know if ancient Israelites would have had the same little trope like that, but you could totally imagine a very funny scene. When we think about the movie, is the person is riding on the donkey, and the donkey just kneels
Oops.
down, and then tries to get the donkey up. The donkey goes the other way, and the stubbornness might be kind of self-evident to the audience that that's part of the humor.
Shrek, the donkey.
Shrek. Is Eddie Murphy playing the donkey?
Yeah,
I
really.
said, I said if you were narrating the story, you'd do the voice of Eddie Murphy for Shrek for the donkey.
The most quoted line in this parsha is the opening of every service in the Siddur, um, and across all of the different traditions. Matovu alecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. My late teacher, Rabbi Israel Silverman, used to say it's interesting that Jews begin their service making reference to a verse recited by a Gentile, and we have lots to say about Matovu Alecha Yaakov, and of course the beautiful melodies that we sing it with, especially at Machane Ramah. where this is being played on 102.3 FM. But we never get to the next verses of this little poem, and the different and all the imagery. And I'm wondering if, for the balance of our Parsha talk, we could explore the subsequent verses in chapter 24, verse 6. So 24:5 is Matovu Alecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And then 24:6, Kinchalim Nitayu, Kiganot Ale Nahar, Ka'ahalim Nata Adonai, Karazim Alemaim, which means like palm groves that stretch out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the water. And then if we continue to verse 7, Yizalmayim midolyav, וזרעו במים רבים, וירום מאגג מלכו, ותינשא מלכותו. Their boughs drip with moisture, their roots have abundant water, their king shall rise above Agag, their kingdom shall be exalted. And so we have now a picture. I mean, you know, if we say the verse Ma tovu alecha Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, or Ma tovu alecha if we sing that verse, and maybe we think about tents, and maybe we think about little dwelling places or sukkot or whatever, but we never really think about palm trees and gardens and aloes and roots dripping with moisture and roots abundant water and streams, etc. And I'm wondering, for the exercise of as a literary exercise, what does this mean? What's the meaning of these metaphors? Or more correctly, these similes. Why is the Torah comparing, or why is Bilam in the Torah comparing the dwelling of Israel as palm groves, as gardens, as aloes, as cedars, as trees or verdant growth? What comes to mind when you use that imagery? It's not the first image I would think of in comparing Israel, in thinking about Israel, or would it be? Is there something that is what does it evoke in us when you think
Well,
about
this is only one of the
one of the comparisons?
well, it's one of the Bilam has, a handful of speeches. He's got, like, I think,
Three
three
or
that are
four.
directed towards the
Mhm.
Israelite, or maybe four, and then a couple that are designated to other nations. And and as we were recording this, I mean, it's just notable that one of those speeches gives us the phrase "Hen am kilavi yakum uke'ari yitnasa lo yishkav ad yochal teref v'dam chalalim yishteh." They are people that rise like a lion and leap up like a lion. They will not rest until they eat prey and drink the blood of the slain. And we happen to be recording this uh, after the conclusion of the 12-day war, and it's known as Mifza Am Kilavi. This is the operation, the rise of the people like the rising lion, which comes from our parsha. So the name of that comes from our parsha. It's one of the cultural features of the IDF, that the names are often, the names of the operations are often biblical
Those biblical
allusions.
phrases. Okay, so
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 it's one of so they are like lions. That's part of the palette of images that Bilam has. But the one that you were pointing to is like these verdant, peaceful by water courses. Like, the water imagery in the Bible is so significant because they don't have the Tigris and Euphrates like some of their neighbors, and they don't have the Nile like others of their neighbors. It's as we will say when we get to Devarim, you will have to irrigate your land because it's going to be irrigated by the spring rain-fed springs. So I think that maybe this is just speculating now, but I think that maybe the original audience for a prophecy like this is like, okay, what's the most wonderful thing you can dream about that will have always enough water and will be like plants, and our branches will drip with water, and that's just like an image of prosperity. Like Isaiah says, "Kinahar shalom," peace will be like a river,
Mhm.
and that's a great image.
we're in the desert. Deserts are we associate desert with being parched, and of course the search for water and satisfying the thirst for Israel is a constant theme throughout the journey. Um, to use this kind of imagery with different kinds of trees, the palm trees, the cedars, the aloe tree. I mean, all of these trees have different characteristics, and different kinds of personifications, different qualities, etc. Um, and it's almost saying, you know, this is a people that has variety. This is a people that sustains itself. And of course, while Torah and Torah study is not a concept here in, the book of Numbers, it's easy to make that what this is talking about and to interpret it that way. But maybe it's just something more basic. This people is alive. This people is alive. And
It,
yeah, go on.
it's not just that the people are alive, they're going to bring the land alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what the key is that the image that we have based on our reading of Balak is that this is a bloodthirsty, warlike people, a destructive nation. And Bilam is saying, Lahavdil, they're not destructive. They're actually life affirming, and they're going to make the land life affirming as well.
So let me ask this question, which it may have been a good question to start with, but it's a good question to end with.
Not too late. We can start over.
We can start with. So, you would think that Balak, the king of Moab, who had seen the calamity that befell the neighboring peoples that encountered Israel, would choose a different tactic. Now he does choose a different tactic. He doesn't choose to go to war against them, but but why does he choose this kind of aggression? After all, he could have chosen peace. He could have
Right.
said, start with negotiation. And of course we are, you know, living in a moment in time when if we could all write the script of life in the world, we say, why do countries have to be belligerent? Especially to Israel. After all, Egypt in the end chose peace. Jordan chose peace. The countries that are signed on to the Abraham Accords, they eventually chose peace. It's quite likely, within our lifetime that Syria, believe it or not, will come to an accommodation with Israel and choose the path of peace. And you know what? Saudi Arabia, it's inevitable. Iran. Um, not likely in the near future, but who knows? Perhaps things are going to unfold in such a way that having exhausted the belligerent strategy, they have to come to terms with themselves and change their internal story, and not the least the Palestinians themselves, who after a century of belligerence and rejection may have to reshape their own narrative and say, we've tried everything, we've tried in terror as a strategy, nothing has worked. Maybe we should try peace, and then see it. So why is the default position of Balak belligerency? And no, I mean, we have different
So
examples in the Bible. Go ahead.
I would offer this explanation that at the beginning of the Parsha, he's described as being afraid. The reason why he chooses not to go to war is because he knows he's going to lose. And diplomacy, I think we sometimes forget, is not always good for both sides. And it may be that Balak thought he would lose that diplomacy as well. That because he had very little to bring to the table, that he would be, let's say, victimized or would suffer greatly through the channels of diplomacy. And so the only thing that comes to his mind is to pursue the Bilam option, which, provided us with a nice show and plenty of humor to get us through the day.
Exactly.
But I think that what it raises for us is this idea that we don't always pay enough attention to the way fear makes people choose less wisely than they might.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind that when people are afraid, it doesn't increase the likelihood they'll make good decisions.
No, I mean, of course, things could have turned out we wouldn't get the Bible the way we have it and these stories. There are moments in the Torah and not in the Torah in the book of Joshua where nations choose a different course and they actually fare quite well by acknowledging the strength of Israel and resolving to live in an accommodation with Israel. Um, and I'm wondering if, of course, the history of America would be completely different. Going back already 150 years to the Civil War, the, I mean, the Civil War had to be fought, I guess, on the base on the question of as Lincoln defined it. The Civil War had to be fought on the proposition that all men were created equal, and but you couldn't have resolved that other than war, I suppose. I mean, is that a reasonable conclusion or
Well, I would go even further. It couldn't be resolved without a brutal war.
a brutal war? Yeah, yeah. And of course the other wars in the major wars in history, World War One, World War Two, or even whatever. But so it's not always inevitable, and there's something to be said for that, which is why this I mean this is comedy, but it's also very serious. There's something very serious to learn from this parsha as we draw our parsha talk to a conclusion. We hope that those who are listening and those who are watching us enjoyed it, and we thank you always for spending the time with us. A special shout out, as always, to our friends at Machaneh Ramah in the Berkshires and to Kol Ramah 102.3, Mitch Mernick, and everybody who produces the shows there. We're glad to be part of the summer, if we are, but we are. And we're looking forward to continuing our conversation. So, in the meantime, Shabbat Shalom. Everyone
Shabbat
enjoy.
shalom.
We'll see you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Bye bye.